Well, how are you, Dr. Evans? Nice to meet you.
Oh, well, nice to meet you. I'm fine, thank you.
Great, really excited about this. So I understand you're going to be delivering a lecture on whether or not the secret gospel of Mark is a forgery or not. Is that right?
Yeah, I
I'm
know.
excited about this one.
This has been a big one for more than 60 years. It's
It
incredible.
really has. It really has. And so I'm really curious to hear where you land on this and why. But let's maybe first set the stage just for the audience who may not be familiar with the very convoluted history and background of this subject. Please tell us what exactly the secret mark is, how it was discovered, stuff like that.
Well, yeah, we always say secret mark, secret mark. That's not really the issue. It's a letter supposedly written by Clement of Alexandria. So the letter would presumably be written in the early third century, that is the early 200s. And it's a letter allegedly he's writing to some leader in the church who has a question. His name is Theodore, and he's discussing a mystical form of the gospel. So even the how to refer to it is an issue. Is it really secret mark or should it be called mystical mark? And anyway, Theodore wants to know, is it true? Is there really a longer version that has some stuff in it that's a little bit surprising? Such as a youth who comes to Jesus at night wearing nothing around his naked body, and it actually says that, except this little linen sheet. And of course, this makes us immediately think of Mark chapter 14, the youth described the same way who flees when Jesus is arrested and someone grabs this sheet that wraps around his body and he flees into the night naked. So, anyway, was there a longer version of Mark that contained this strange story where he comes to Jesus at night and Jesus teaches him the mysteries, the secrets of the kingdom of God? Quotes Mark chapter 4, a verse about the mysteries being disclosed to the disciples, but not to outsiders. So anyway, that's what the issue is. Is it genuine? And so, by the way, it was announced at SBL, Society of Biblical Literature, 1960. And 13 years later, here it is, published by Morton Smith, who passed away in 1991. This is the Harvard University Press 450-page, very scholarly version. And here's the 190-page popular version by HarperCollins. And they both come out in 73. Well, immediately people smelled a rat. So this, I think, is fake. And there were even insinuations that maybe Smith is the faker. So it became a big deal for years. Then this is Scott Brown's book. This is the published version of 2005, where he assumes that it's an authentic letter of Clement, that there really was a longer version of Mark. And the real question is what did it mean? Is it the original Mark and all this kind of thing? And so a very learned, scholarly version. He says Smith misunderstood it in key places. It's really the mystical mark, not secret mark, and other things about it. Smith has not understood it. And oh, by the way, of course it's authentic. So he doesn't spend a lot of time defending Smith and that question. He thinks that's so passe, we can ignore it. However, this came out in '05, just weeks difference in time, same year, this book came out by Stephen Carlson saying it's a hoax. Smith made it up. He invented it. And he did handwriting analysis. He did some other investigations. And Carlson's no dummy. He's worked with, he's a lawyer. Now he's a New Testament scholar in Australia. And so he even had an FBI consultant looking at it. Well, my goodness. And then just a couple years later, this guy says, obviously it's a hoax. It does not reflect Alexandrian Christianity properly. Clement would understand. He's Clement of Alexandria, after all. This thing, and then he pointed out it's got Nietzschean perspectivalism in it about true truth or truth that isn't true and that kind of thing. He said this is clearly a forgery by somebody in the 20th century, and that's probably Morton Smith. So this whole thing has just exploded. There have been conferences on it. That's where we are today.
And we don't have a physical copy of it. We just have photographs of it,
That's right.
correct?
We actually have two sets of photographs. The one set that Morton Smith took himself in black and white, it's in the back of this book. It's not a very high quality set of photographs, the way it's reproduced. The photographs themselves are good quality. But what got printed in the back of this Harvard University Press wasn't real good. And that's part of the controversy because Stephen Carlson analyzes what turns out to be rather inferior photographs and he sees forger's trimmer. That is when a forger, anybody, I mean, there are some like Klaus Kujau who faked Hitler's diaries 40 years ago, almost got away with it. He was so good. But an amateur forger, so to speak, who's not really good, he writes too slowly, and there's a little bit of a tremor as he's trying to imitate the letters and the ligatures that are not his own. But it turns out the evidence of the forger's tremor disappears when you have good photographs. It's the lousy photographs in this book. So this book you can see here, these authors just a year ago raised the question about, wait a minute, maybe the whole scientific analysis, the handwriting analysis is deeply flawed because the best evidence was not used. So that's where we are today. So we have two views then. Smith's a liar. He invented it. There never was a secret mark. Or the other view, say Scott Brown's view, oh, he was telling the truth. It is an authentic document. I think both views are wrong. And so my presentation coming up next month is say there's actually a third alternative that has huge explanatory power. And by the way, they're really on that path. So there's just a little bit. I mean, I agree with most of what Jeffrey Smith, no relation to Morton Smith, and Brent Landau, these guys did a brilliant job in their work. And I do recommend this book. I think it answers a lot of questions. But I still argue for a relatively late date for the composition of this work. Oh, and I should have mentioned, where is Secret Mark found?
Yeah,
It's written in the back of a book. I don't have a copy of it. It's relatively rare. It's a book that came out in the middle of the 17th century by a scholar named Isaac Voss, a Dutch scholar. And the book is written in Latin, even though there are critical editions of the Greek text of the letters of Ignatius. And so right in the back, most books have what are called end papers. They're blank. On 3 of these pages, we have the equivalent of 2 2/3 pages of handwritten Greek text in a monastic style Greek hand. That's where it's found. There is no ancient manuscript. There is no reference anywhere in antiquity. No church father, nobody refers to secret or mystical mark. Nobody refers to this letter. Nobody talks about the passage in question where this naked youth comes to Jesus at night to be taught or initiated into the mysteries of the kingdom of God. There is no history of that. Zero. It just shows up in these 3 end pages in the back of this book in 1648. And Smith suggested that somebody copied it out in this book and when the book was about 100 years old, in the middle of the 18th century, that is 1750s, in the aftermath of a fire in a cave at Marsaba, the monastery that's halfway between Jerusalem and the Dead Sea in the Judean desert, because a lot of books were destroyed or damaged. And so somebody found this charred remains of a manuscript and wrote out all that survives in the back of this book by Isaac Voss. But otherwise, the text is quite old. And that's why Smith said, oh, I know this is weird. And by the way, a lot of texts from antiquity do survive in odd ways. In a second or third translation, the Testament of Moses, for example, survives in just a few pages in Latin. We think it's a translation of an earlier Greek, which was itself a translation of either Aramaic or Hebrew, going all the way back to the early 1st century. And yet somehow it survives only in part and a relatively poorly constructed Latin translation from the Middle Ages. So things do have a weird way of surviving in odd places. But those are the facts. That's what we
Yeah.
know, and everything else is just interpretation.
But why can't we go and consult that original? Well, not I
Uh,
guess original manuscript. Why can't we
yeah.
go and consult that 18th century document today?
Well, there
Is
you
it missing or
go.
something?
Well, that's what adds to the mystery.
Yeah.
We have Morton Smith's photographs,
Uh huh.
not just these, but the actual photographs that were in his papers after he died. So those photographs are available. Those were consulted by this Smith and Landau. But we also have some beautiful color photographs that somebody took in the 1980s. However, those pages from the Isaac Voss book are missing. The Isaac Voss book, which is not in Jerusalem anymore, it's been taken to Greece, Athens, and so it's in the possession of the patriarchy. But the end papers we're talking about are gone. They were removed. Do they still exist, or have they been destroyed? We don't know. So that
And
means we can't study. No scientist can look
right.
at the paper and say, when did this ink get applied to the paper? Was it applied 300 years ago, or was it applied 80 years ago, or 100 years ago? We don't know.
Now, aren't there other people that say that they saw it? Other than Morton Smith.
Yes, 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 yeah, 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 and of course, nobody, everybody agrees that these pages existed at one time, even if they have been destroyed. Nobody doubts that. Some people
Hmm.
make it sound like it's all a big lie, that these pages didn't exist, or they weren't part of this book, or this book was not at Marsaba at one time or another. That's all. Nobody doubts that. The question is who wrote those words? Who wrote those 2 2/3 pages in the back of this book? Who did it, and when did he do it?
Hmm.
That's the real question. And
Yeah.
and when they were written there, was it based on an even older document, or is this an original composition? I mean, one handwriting person looked at it and said, "This is the autograph." That means this is the first time it was written out. Well, if that's true, no matter when you date the writing in the back of the book, 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, it clearly isn't ancient. It can't, if that's an autograph, that is, it's its original writing, then it doesn't go back to antiquity. Scott Brown has wasted his time talking about a text that's either medieval or modern or something like that. So we don't have the actual pages. They did exist at one time. Maybe they still do under lock and key. And no scientist has had the chance to study the ink on the page. And see, that's what tripped up Klaus Kujau in the Hitler Diaries thing. His imitation of the handwriting, Hitler's handwriting, fooled everybody. All handwriting experts said that's Hitler's hand. But when the scientists looked at the ink and the way it rested on the pages and did a chemical analysis, they discovered the chemical on the pages, it's called sizing, that prevents the ink from soaking into the paper and looking kind of blotchy. The sizing is post World War II. Well, man, that rules out Hitler. Hitler, after World War II, he wasn't around. He didn't write these 60 volumes, these diaries. And that's when Klaus Kujau in the 1980s confessed that he, in fact, was the forger. Well, we can't apply that kind of test to these pages. If we could, like, it might suggest that the ink was applied in the 1800s or in the 1700s. What would that prove? Morton Smith cannot possibly be the forger. If the ink was applied to the paper 100 years before Smith was born, Smith's in the clear. He was born in 1915, and so is he a faker or not? So that's the one key thing that would prove something. But as to let's say it shows Smith didn't write it, does that mean it really is ancient, that it's authentic, that Clement wrote this letter a long time ago, that there really was a secret or longer mark? No, that's still up in the air.
So what's your third path? What's your proposal?
Okay, I hate that. I'm giving away the. Am I supposed to give away the secret on your show?
Maybe just a little teaser. You don't have to give the whole thing.
I think Smith did find it.
Hmm.
Here's the tease, though.
Hmm.
When did he find it? I don't think he found it in 1958. That's his public statement. Why do I say that? Because in at least 3 publications, he gives away the fact that he knows what's in it. And that's why people think he's the author of it, because that is an axiom in the detection of forgeries. And that is there evidence that the person who discovered the artifact in question, the painting, the manuscript, whatever we're talking about, is there evidence that the discoverer had knowledge of the contents or the nature of the find before he found it?
Mm.
And there are 3 very odd ideas in Smith's writings. I'll share with you one. He reacts angrily to a commentary on Mark by Vincent Taylor, a great scholar, British scholar. The commentary on Mark came out in 1952. The following year, Smith produced a review of it, and he took angry exception to Taylor's comment that there is no Johannine-like tradition, nothing that would resemble the Gospel of John in Mark. And Smith says, how does he know that? There could well have been Johannine stuff in Mark. Well, that's a very curious. Why would any synoptic scholar, any gospel scholar, even make a deal out of that? Well, it's because Secret Mark, supposedly a version of Mark, has Johannine stuff in it. In other words, his own version of the raising of Lazarus. Now, there are 2 other very unusual things that Smith talks about in pre-1958 publications. And so all 3 of those odd things that scholars weren't talking about, wouldn't even suggest, all 3 of them are in the document he finds in quotation marks, at Marsaba in 1958. So I'm going to argue that Smith had the text in his possession for years before 1958. How do we know that? What's the evidence for it? How does this explain Smith's odd behavior? You know, what's odd? Here's a teaser. He supposedly has found a document that suggests that Jesus was a magician who practiced secret rites and may even have been gay. So he's got an actual text, primary text, possibly written by Clement himself, or at least originally written by Clement, talking about a version of Mark that's longer, that has Jesus receiving scantily clad men at night, initiating them into the kingdom of heaven. Secret rites. Woo! That's exactly what he argues for in 1978 in his text just 5 years after this called Jesus the Magician. And you know what's really weird? He never appeals to Secret Mark. I don't understand that at all. If I were a scholar arguing for a new position, a rather startling new view of Jesus or the Apostle Paul or somebody, and I had access to a newly discovered or recently published primary text that lent support for that view, of course I would refer to it, especially if I'm the guy that published it. You know, scholarly vanity kicks in sometimes. I said, this is the text I found and studied for 15 years and published back in 73. It supports what I'm saying. But he does not do that. Stephen Carlson, he notes that, and he says, well, Smith in his serious work isn't going to cite a text he knows perfectly well is a fake. because he faked it. I think there's a better explanation. Nobody labors on a fake for 15 years and then doesn't use it. There's a better explanation. That's my tease. You'll hear more next month.
Sure. I wonder if maybe he didn't appeal to it just because he knew it was in dispute.
Oh, you don't know Smith.
Okay.
Dispute? Dispute? Are you kidding? Oh, that was his life's blood.
Okay.
Sticking people in the eye with a sharp pencil. That's Smith.
So
I got another tease for you. You know, they like to raise the question, was Smith smart enough to write it? Did he know Greek well enough to compose this text and then write it in the back of this book? I know somebody who knew Smith very well and knew how well he knew Greek very well. And I've got a pretty good answer on that. So
yeah,
that's
so he
another.
probably knew Clementine Greek, I guess. So I guess I'm confused on the 1958 part. Why would he, if he knew about this before 1958, why wouldn't he disclose that before? Why did he wait until then? I guess I'm not following that part.
No, it's not hard. I'm tracking myself. I have a leaf of Greek. Okay, it belongs to a library near here, but I have beautiful high resolution color photographs of the front side, back side of this parchment page. And it's believed to be an apocryphal text called the Miracles of Mary. It dates to probably the 14th century. So this is not going to change anything, of course.
Sure.
I have been working on it for 2 or 3 years, trying to decipher the handwriting. Now, there's a lot about this text I don't know. So all I have done is privately show it to 2 people to help me transcribe it correctly, and I now have the text. This is the Greek text. This is what it's saying. I'm still pondering it. I will probably send it to a chap who knows Mariology very well to get his opinion. I'm not going to go public. I'm not going to post something on my webpage. I'm not going to give an interview and talk about this text. And here's its translation, and this is how I think it's significant, or this is what it means, until I have a much better idea of its value. And what will happen, somebody might tell me, oh, this is so common. There are scads of the copies of this. This is just another version. It's just, there's nothing new here. There's nothing worthwhile. And I'll just put it away. So what I think, and this is very much in step with what Smith and Landau say too, Smith wisely went through a vetting process. Now, I think the vetting process began informally prior to 1958, and there's evidence of that in his correspondence with Gershom Scholem, who was very much into Gnosticism and mysticism in the Jewish world. I think there was a little bit of vetting going on, very private. Then in 1958, this is when I look what I found. The vetting continues until 1960 when he publicly discloses it, circulates his transcription, even as I'm about to do with the page I'm talking about. So here's the Greek text. Here's my translation of it. What do you think? I think he's quite sincere. And in other words, he's not trying to say, can I get away with a forgery? He wants to know, okay, you guys who are patristic scholars, who potentially know Clement better than I do, what do you think? And so Henry Chadwick weighs in, Erwin Goodenough weighs in, and Arthur Darby Knock weighs in too. I'll get to that and his interesting advice. And I think what Smith was trying to find out was if this strikes people as credible, as potentially genuine, I'll proceed with it. If I get a lot of pushback saying, oh, Morton, don't be stupid. This is obviously a fake. You found it written in the back of oh, come on. I think he'd have dropped it. but he received enough affirmation that he decided to pursue it. And so for the next 13 years, he works on it. And then, as I said, publishes two books, one popular, one long and learned. And that's not because he's writing on a work that he knows is a hoax. He's now convinced that it has merit. But after it's published in 73, I think he begins to have doubts, not on the forgery question. He has doubts about its value. And so when he writes Jesus the Magician in 78, he decides it's leaning on a reed. He's not gonna make use of it. That's my take.
In other words, even if he didn't forge it, it doesn't necessarily mean that it goes actually back to Clement. And
That's
maybe
right.
he was starting to doubt that. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, and that goes back to what I was saying at the beginning. There are two alternatives that are popular right now. Smith is telling the truth. He found it when he said he found it. This is a real thing. No, he didn't fake it. And you know what? It could be genuine. That's one position. That's Scott Brown's position. And others agree with him. The late Marvin Meyer, my good friend from Claremont for years and years. There are other people who agree with that. And then there's the other one, and that, oh, it's fake. Smith faked it. He's not telling any truth about it. It has no value whatsoever. I'm suggesting that there's a middle alternative that needs to be explored, and it's very similar to what's argued here in this book. I just point out a few things that I think got overlooked here.
Yeah, wonderful. Now, I guess last question here, because I know we're up against the clock, so wrapping it up. Um, let's just assume that this was authentic. Would this change our understanding of the biblical depiction of Jesus?
It could. Uh, I mean, because it's not only does he happily receive this youth who's scantily clad, it then helps us identify who the guy is in chapter 14 who runs away. Maybe it links him to the mysterious youth who appears at the empty tomb in chapter 16. So it could influence how we understand Mark. But also remember, there's a shorter passage in Clement's letter where the women want to see Jesus and he refuses to see them. And some say, see, this is adding to the homoerotic dimension. Jesus is happy to spend time with naked youths, men. He's not interested in meeting with women. So, yeah, it would impact that. It would have a huge impact on textual criticism. So, do we have the original text of Mark or not? Maybe we only have a recension, the shorter recension of Mark. There was a different one out there. We could then speculate what other differences might there have been. So there's that impact. And of course, then we have to wonder, how is it critics of Christianity did know about this? That would be a great one to, attack the character, in the Jewish world, a gay Jesus. That wouldn't play well. So there are a lot of questions that we'd have to address.
Sure. Yeah. And I can see some pushback on some of the interpretations of those passages and saying it doesn't necessarily mean that something homoerotic was going on. I could see a debate and discussion on just that alone.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. There'd be a lot of things. So text critical issues, the whole history of the Gospel of Mark and textual criticism, but patristic testimony. Remember, Christianity in the second and third centuries was being seriously challenged by critics like Celsus and Porphyry, and they loved to run with the women. Like Jesus surrounds himself with women, at least one of whom was insane, Mary Magdalene and the demons. They're the first witnesses of the empty tomb. You must be kidding me. And so if we have a Jesus who hangs out with naked youths, oh boy, now it's getting even better. And so the polemic against Jesus in rabbinic literature begins to emerge in the second century. So if we have a version of Mark kicking around and Pastor Theodore asking questions of Clement, how do I understand it? Is it genuine? And Clement, of course, says, well, actually, it is. I mean, the critics of Christianity, both pagan and Jewish, would have a field day. Yet there's not a trace of it.
Exactly. I mean, you would think others would have brought this up as an
You'd think
objection.
so.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
it seems very suspicious. Well, looking forward to your lecture. Go ahead and put in a plug for your material, your website, anything that you want the audience to know about.
Well, my webpage is on craigaevans.com. My books are listed there too. I do have a fairly scholarly discussion of Jesus and the manuscripts, and that is the name of the book. And you can read about it on my webpage. It came out in 2020. So I look at all manuscripts that talk about Jesus, not just the one we're talking about here. And that would include patristic, rabbinic, pagan, even the Quran,
Hmm.
what is said about Jesus.
Oh, excellent. I need to look into that one. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Looking forward to the lecture, and this was truly an honor. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Good time.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.